Hi, thank you for choosing My Court Coach. I'm Jaylyn, and I'm going to be your instructor as we talk about the Request for Order form, FL-300. Now, we're going to use this form if you are also requesting a temporary emergency order. In order to obtain a temporary emergency order, you would need to have shown the judge that there is immediate or irreparable harm to you, your children, or your property. So if the court believes that any of those circumstances exist, then the court will in fact issue temporary emergency orders. In order to get those temporary emergency orders, you have to have an emergency hearing. So if you had an emergency hearing and the court granted emergency orders, then you would fill out this request for order form and have this box checked for temporary emergency order, because those emergency orders must be attached to this form. And the reason being, it's supposed to notify the other party that temporary emergency orders have been made, and we're going to come back at a second time at this day and time and location and further argue the issues underlying the temporary emergency order. Now, the temporary emergency orders could relate to any one of these issues. So custody, visitation, spouse support, child support, domestic violence order, attorney's fees, property control, or other. Another could be the sale of a home or issuing passports. So temporary emergency orders can be made for any one of these issues and other issues that you might, come up with. It's very important that you use this form to get that sort of relief in court, because otherwise, if you went into court just checking off the boxes for child custody and visitation, but you didn't select child support, the court's not going to award you child support at the hearing. So it's very important that any issue that you want the judge to hear from you about, any issues, no matter how small it is, you have to list it on this form in order for the court to hear you out. Because all it takes is for the other party to say, it wasn't on this FL-300 form, and therefore I didn't have an opportunity to respond in a longer period of time, and therefore the court should just deny the other party's request because I didn't really receive notice of it. And that notice stems from this request for order. It's supposed to provide information, of course, to the court and information to the other party that these are the issues that I want to address with the court on this particular day and time and the location. And that would be provided to you from the courthouse. And the court will expect you to attach the temporary emergency orders along with this request for order form. Now, if you don't have a temporary emergency order and you checked off this box and you handed it to the business office, then they'll likely reject your document and ask you to reissue this form. Now, in order for you to get this court hearing, the court is actually going to be the one to issue it. So if you have a temporary emergency order, then the judge is making that hearing date on the day that it's also making the temporary emergency order. So what that means is, let's say you had your emergency hearing today and the court made the orders and it's asking you to come back a second time. That second time, that second date is going to be listed on this request for order form, and the judge will have that completed for you or ask you to complete it as you're sitting there, or perhaps hand it to the clerk to complete it for you and to process this request for order. Now, if it does not grant you the emergency order, then the court is not going to allow you to check off this temporary emergency order box, and you would just have to file it again in due course on the court's normal calendar. It's not going to have you come back a second time on an emergency basis to further deal with the issues that you have under your request for order because the court didn't deem that there's immediate or irreparable harm to you, your child, or property. I hope that you found this helpful, and thank you for listening.